Hello, this presentation is regarding the instruments of the orchestra. So inside this we're going to take a look at each of the major families that are found in the orchestra and each family's sound production, so how they create sound. So we're going to start with the string family. The string family is the largest in the orchestra, and you always see them sitting in the front. So the 5 major instruments that we find in the orchestra, we'll start with the 4 that look very similar to each other. The first is the violin. Then we have the viola, which is basically its little bit bigger brother. Then the cello, which is much larger, so large in fact that it has to be set on the floor and then put in between your legs in order to play it. And then lastly we have the bass, or sometimes known as the double bass. And using the bass you have to actually sit on a stool or stand up to play it. The one over here to the right that is the most different looking is called the harp, and that is still a string instrument. You see all the strings that are going up and down it, and it is still sound is still made the same way. It just looks a little bit different. So let's talk about how that sound is made. So sound comes from vibrations, and the vibrations of the string is the sound that you hear from a string instrument, and you get that sound by using a bow to either pull across the string or by using your finger to pluck it. And in this short little video here you see just how much a string actually vibrates when it is plucked, or in this case bowed, by that big bow that you see going across there. Alright, next let's move on to the brass family, the shiniest of the families. Originally most instruments were made out of the metal brass, but now they're made out of different things. So we have the 4 major instruments from the brass family. We'll start with the smallest, which is the trumpet. Then we'll move on to the middle range, which is the French horn. And then the 2 lowest instruments, we have the trombone, which you can see looks a little bit different because it has that big slide that goes up and down instead of the buttons, which we call valves. And then lastly, the low guy is the tuba. So all of these make sound by having air blown into them. The special part about that, though, is that you have to buzz your lips. We call it buzzing your lips, which, as you can see in the picture here, the man has his lips pursed together very tightly, and then you blow air through there, which then vibrates your lips. And that vibration makes that funny buzzing sound or raspberry sound that then gets put through the instrument. And that is how brass instruments sound. Our next family is the woodwind family. There are lots of different instruments in the woodwind family with a huge variety of sound. So we'll start with the major ones that you see all the time. That is the flute. Then we have the clarinet, the oboe, and the bassoon. Now the other ones are variations or additions to those woodwind instruments that sometimes you'll see in the orchestra, sometimes you'll not. So we have the piccolo, which is basically a little tiny version of the flute. We have the saxophone, which you usually see more in a band instead of the orchestra. The English horn, which is similar to the oboe. The bass clarinet, which is just a lower version of the regular clarinet. And the contrabassoon, which is also a lower version of the bassoon. So let's talk about how a woodwind instrument makes sound. A woodwind instrument also uses air that's going to be blown by the player into the instrument, but it crosses what we call a reed. And you can see it's a little strip of bamboo or a little strip of wood that will vibrate as the player blows across it. Sometimes there's 2 reeds in the oboe and the bassoon. We call those double reed instruments, and they work the same way. The air goes across the wood and vibrates that, which makes the sound. Last family is the percussion family. There's all kinds of instruments in this as well. As you can see here, I'm not going to label all of them because there's so many, but there's the big thing about percussion instruments is they can be played in 3 different ways to make sound. The first way is we can strike them. You can see here striking just means hit. So we can use a stick or a mallet or a hand or something else to hit the instrument, and then that is going to make the vibrations sound. The second way is to shake them, which you most often see in maracas, some of my favorite instruments. There's also several different other kinds of instruments that make the same sound that shake that cause the sound. And then lastly, we can scrape them. And here you have what's called a wero, which is just an instrument. You use a stick and you scrape that stick across there, and that's going to cause those vibrations and make that sound. So we have four main instrument families. We have the string family, and you play that with either a bow or plucking a string. The brass family, where you buzz your lips to create your vibrations through the horn. The woodwind family, where you're blowing into the instrument and it's either was one point made of wood or it's vibrating a wooden reed to make sound. And then you have our percussion family. And the percussion family makes sound by either striking, shaking, or scraping our instrument. And those are our four major instrument families from the orchestra.